So, Rita and James, there was a Labor Party conference where they tied themselves up into all sorts of knots over Israel, whether they debate it, not debate it. James, this was some kind of coronation, wasn't it, of Albanese?
Well, this is a really interesting thing here. Anthony Albanese went into this conference and came out of it apparently triumphant. Now, he has become solidified as, this sort of icon within the Labour Party. He is the guy who has delivered for the Labour base. He's given the left what they want by backing away from Israel and shifting things towards Palestine. Not enough for Ed Husic, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is the really interesting thing here, Rowan and Rita. This moment here, they always say your moment of your greatest triumph is your moment of your greatest threat. Hubris is followed by nemesis. This guy has done really, really well by 30% of the Australian people. But for everybody else who's not part of the Labour faithful, which is about 70% of the country, things have gone backwards. Living standards have gone backwards. The economy is going backwards. The share of the government is going up. We're all worse off. Our social cohesion is falling apart. Everyone's at each other's throats. And that 70% ultimately is going to be what has a say over Anthony Albanese's future. I think if I was him, I wouldn't be crowing about this. I would be very nervous about what the future holds.
Well, Rita, we had Ed Husic, who seemed to be stirring the pot a bit. Let's just have a quick listen.
Is the caucus ruled by theory?
No, I think the caucus, I would take the view that there's this, as I said earlier, a perception that having a different view or taking a different stand or staking different ground, that presents as a risk to the stability of the government. I think that's overblown. If they can put me in the freezer, I don't give a shit.
OK, so Rita, there you go. That's Ed Husic spelling it out.
Well, you know what? I think if you're going to have a national conference, you should be debating these ideas. And what is the Prime Minister so terrified of? What wings within his own party, what factions within his own party is he terrified the Australian people are going to become aware of if they actually have a full, robust debate about these topics? That's what it's there for. So I think Husic actually has a point there. And I think the Prime Minister knows if you put this to a vote, the results might shock many people in Australia, just how radical elements within Labor are and what they are calling for.
I think that's the key point, and I think the fact that the Labor Party are terrified of exposing just how radical they are. The weird thing, James, is that had they had this debate, they would have gone even further than they've already gone. They've already gone very strongly hardcore left-wing by international standards. The real face of Labor is even more radical.
G'day, legends. What if I told you the Prime Minister just dodged a vote at his own party's conference like it was a live grenade? Stick with me, because this one's got backroom drama, dodged questions, and a Prime Minister who might be more nervous than he's letting on. Quick favour before we dive in. If you're enjoying these breakdowns, smash that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Over 90% of you watching right now haven't subscribed yet. It costs nothing, takes a second, and it means the world to this channel. Cheers if you did. Right, let's get into it.
Oh, yeah, and it's also, not just what was happening on the main stage there, but what was happening in the fringe panels, So all sorts of stuff, not just about Israel, about energy, about renewables. These guys are the true believers, They are full all in. They consider Albanese a moderate, all right? Ooh. And they think he's sort of on the right almost because he's not giving them everything they want on going full bonkers renewables, full this, full that, full, Palestine. And again, that debate would be actually in the long run probably a lot more healthy for the Labour Party because you could have the, as they say in Seinfeld, the airing of grievances. But not only that, it would be a way for Labour to realize that actually, because the blowback from it, in the outside world, would actually indicate to Labour that they need to recalibrate, that they are the ones who, for everything Albanese talks about, and this is the great disconnect, Albanese always talks about becoming, the centrist, moderate party of government, the natural party of government. We are process-driven, we are orderly, but that's camouflage. That's a cloak. What's actually happening behind the scenes in where Labour people talk, in where the Greens are dragging them further to the left, is so out of step with mainstream Australia. And we've seen it over and over and over again. They're so out of touch. That's why the budget landed with a thud. And that's why I think this whole conference, this coronation, once you start talking about a coronation, someone's going to come and kill the king.
Well, metaphorically speaking, but Ed Husic was clearly wanted to get the debate about Israel up and running, which is hilarious. I mean, they're so far to the left anyway on Israel. They have demonised Israel. They have turned on Jewish Australians. The Labor Party is the enemy of Jewish Australians, which is very clear to most Jewish Australians. And it's just the beginning. How rabid and radical would they be if they got their way? Already, they're changing things. For example, part of recognising Palestine, which itself was a hardcore, hard left-wing idea, they're now dismantling elements of that, so they're no longer demanding that Hamas not be part of the government of Gaza, etc., Rita.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. This conference was sold as Albanese's crowning moment. Total control, the left faction happy, everyone singing from the same song sheet. But hold on, because a coronation built on silence isn't strength. It's a pressure cooker with the lid screwed on extra tight. Let's talk numbers for a second, because this is where it really bites. Albanese's government is humming along nicely for the slice of the electorate closest to Labour's base, but for a huge chunk of everyday Australians dealing with mortgage stress, grocery prices that need their own interest rate, and rents going through the roof, the vibe is very different. And that gap, folks, is where elections get won and lost. Inside the party itself, there's a tug-of-war happening. The socialist left wants faster, bolder moves on everything from energy policy to foreign affairs, and some of them reckon Albanese's dragging his feet, playing it too safe. Meanwhile, out in the suburbs, plenty of voters think the party's drifting the opposite direction entirely. Try being the Prime Minister trying to keep both of those camps smiling at the same barbecue.
Well, this is Labor, and we've not just got Labor in government, we've got the socialist left faction of Labor running the show. So it shouldn't be a shock that it is a virulently, unashamedly left-wing government. They've been from day one. When Anthony Albanese was first elected Prime Minister, what's the very first thing he promised the nation? The Indigenous voice. And he thought it was a done deal. He thought everyone was going to fall in line. And obviously that did not turn out, but they haven't listened. They have just soldiered on. And you've got to give it to Labor. They don't waste power. You get the coalition getting in there. They do nothing about, really, very much. They still let the bureaucrats run the show largely. They do very little about the so-called culture wars. And Labor don't waste a day in power. They relentlessly push their positions in every area.
Despite the will of the people, as we saw at the beginning of the show, that Gelling Wall thing, there's voice in Victoria. Victoria voted against a voice. They've now got one. I don't know how that works.
And a treaty. We've also got a treaty in
got
Victoria.
A treaty.
I don't remember voting for a treaty in any sort of election.
The absurdity of a House of Parliament or a chamber, whatever you want to call it, that does have a say over every aspect of Victorian legislation. There they are with their trees and their performative arts, speaking in these different languages that the average Australian wouldn't have a clue what they're talking about. Andrew Thorpe, Lydia Thorpe's son pops up. This is what The Voice is. It's there for everybody to see. We didn't like it in principle, in theory, in the abstract. What do we make of it in reality? Because that is what Labor will introduce if they get back in, James. No question. They've made that very clear. That is what they will do.
Sure, but this brings us back to something which we were just talking about here, which is the Palestine issue with Labor. Now, The Voice is just the biggest and most prominent element of the way Labor and the left view society as a bunch of ethnic groups. You cut them up, you give them power, you fight them against each other, and you control the whole show. The Palestine question, this is the most, actually, I think, dangerous federally right now because, you know, this is being driven by people like Tony Burke, Jason Clare, people in Western Sydney and Melbourne seats where they have high 20, 30, and we'll see after the next census, higher than that, Muslim populations that are very, very restive on the question of Palestine. And so they are being dragged. And as a result, Labor's foreign policy and the foreign policy of Australia is being dragged to a far more radical position than it should be as a result of the ethnic and religious pandering that they're doing in these seats. This is only going to get worse because remember at the last election, there was that group Muslim Votes that was trying to do and almost did a sort of thing like what was happening in Northern England. Remember that by-election? You've got that green-red alliance, the Islamo-green sort of politics. Well, that's coming here. That's coming here, and they're terrified of it. And all of this, because they have given an inch on this, they are now absolutely going to be dragging the whole country this way. This is why these culture things matter. This is why migration matters. This is also why I think, because people see this happening, this is why Pauline Hanson is getting such a good run.
Absolutely. We'll have a listen to this guy from the New South Wales Muslim Vote that you just mentioned.
We're at now about 1 million Muslims, but in 5-10 years' time, we will be at a couple of million. And so we absolutely have to set up the institutions now to build that political power.
So they're not even pretending this isn't the game. The game in town now is for a Muslim-controlled political entity or institutions that hold power for Muslims. So forget your multiculturalism, you clowns in the Liberal Party going on about multiculturalism. This is what multiculturalism delivers. It delivers a determined group based on whatever identity you want to call, who are determined to get power and use that power for themselves, James.
Oh, and more than that, though, think about the hypocrisy of the left on this thing here. I mean, you remember Scott Morrison went to Hillsong. Now, I don't begrudge him going to Hillsong. I don't begrudge anybody going to any house of worship. I think that's a good thing. But they towed him up on that. They said, he's a Pentecostal. He's going to be taking orders from all these crazy speaking in tongues sort of people. Could you imagine if, let's just say, there was a Catholic group that was going around saying, there's X million numbers of Catholics and we're going to build a Catholic political movement to change the laws on abortion and, things like that. It would be all over the ABC all day, every day. It would be all over the Sydney Morning Herald all day, every day. Nobody would read it or see it because it was on the ABC and the Sydney Morning Herald, but they would be absolutely losing their mind over it.
And it's not just economic policy causing headaches. Foreign policy positions like the approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict have become genuine flashpoints inside the party room, with different factions pulling hard in different directions. Add debates over Indigenous recognition processes still rolling on at a state level, and you've got a government juggling a lot more than it lets on during a press conference. So why avoid an open debate at your own conference? Simple. Debates are unpredictable. Debates show cracks, and cracks are exactly what you don't want the cameras catching if you're trying to sell unity. Here's the real takeaway. Dodging a vote might look like control today, but voters have a funny way of noticing when they're not being trusted with the truth. And if there's one thing that lights a fire under the Australian public, it's feeling like decisions are being made everywhere except in front of them. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below.